Hey, ladies, welcome to episode 71 of the Health, Life, and More for Women podcast. I am so excited to have newly published author Nancy Holte on the podcast today. Her new book, Back Away from the Cookies, is sold on Amazon in Kindle and paperback. Ladies, you're going to love this interview. You're going to love this book. Let's just dive right in.
Welcome to the Health, Life, and More for Women podcast with certified life coach, mom of four, and just all-around lover of all things 80s, your host, Jennifer D'Amato. Buckle in. Let's get started.
Hey, Nancy, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here today.
I'm so excited to be here, Jen. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Let's just dive right in. And would you just share a little bit about yourself with the listeners?
Okay. I am a wife of like 100 years and maybe not quite that long. And I have 3 boys that are all grown and they're all married. And I have 5 grandchildren ranging in age from 10 down to 1.5. I grew up in Southern California, and now I live in Southern Minnesota. And people ask me how I got here. And that's a good question.
I'm curious too. That's some different climates, Nancy. That's some serious climate change.
Very different climates. And I went to college in Oregon, and as did my husband. He was in optometry school at the same school where I was in undergraduate school. And we met and fell in love and got married way too young. And he grew up in northern Minnesota. And I said I would move to Minnesota if we could live within 1 hour of the airport. So we do. And I use that as an opportunity to leave in the middle of winter.
Yeah. I've lived in the Midwest. I can appreciate being close to an airport and leaving. I mean, I did grow up in cold climate, but now that I live in warmer climate, I'm not sure I could go back to the colder climate. So, well, Nancy, I love what you shared. You already hit on some things that I know I want to dive into, but one thing I want to make sure that you include is you are an author of an amazing newly released book.
I am. It still kind of freaks me out, if I'm being honest, because I worked on that book for a long, long time, and I'm just kind of geeked out that it's actually released and out in the public. So
yes. Now, Nancy knows, and I'll share with the listeners here that, I was given, an early release. I was given an early release copy of the book. And I was really excited. And then I saw the title. And, my listeners know I'm an intuitive eating coach, and that's what, my business is. And this title of the book is Back Away from the Cookies. I was like, oh, what? I had to read this book. I told Nancy when we first spoke, I was like, the title alone made me open the book. I was like, oh, what is she going to say here? Can you share a little bit about how this title came to be?
Sure. First of all, I want to clarify, it is not a diet book.
No.
Because you wouldn't want to ask me about dieting, just as an FYI. I was driving along one day and listening to the radio, and the radio announcer said, if you were going to tell something to your younger self, what would it be? And immediately into my mind came, back away from the cookies, because I've eaten far too many cookies in my lifetime. And I thought, then maybe I would not have gained as much weight as I did, and I would be in better shape today. But that is not what the book is about at all. It's just, so I started thinking a little bit more about what it meant, to talk to my younger self and what I would say. And I came up with quite a few things I wished I'd known when I was younger, or at least had thought about.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we could totally just dive into everything you said as far as cookies and eating them and, our weight and diet culture. But for
Well, let's not.
today. For today, I love this idea. I actually dedicated a very early on podcast episode called Dear Younger Me and talking to our younger self. So that to me is like everything. This book highlights several areas that you would go back to and the words you would
Hmm.
use and the lessons you've learned, the things you would say to your younger self. And that's I mean, to me, I love that. I love that there's this perspective you have now. And it's, if I may, Nancy, I feel like it's just filled with so much grace for your younger self.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, as they say, and this is kind of an interesting time to bring it up, hindsight is 2020. But you know,
We've ruined that phrase forever, Nancy. We've ruined the
yeah,
phrase
we
forever.
have. It's been ruined forever. So I'd like to be way back again. 2020 being a long time ago. But
Yes, so I even love that you bring in, so each chapter at the end of it, you actually wrote a letter to younger Nancy as part of the book.
yeah, that just happened when I was reading it. I'm like, maybe it'd be best to just summarize this chapter in some way so that it was a quick and easy little, chit chat with myself, basically. And so, yeah, it was fun to do that.
Yeah, I'm curious if you, through this process, because writing a book is no easy undertaking. That's a huge task on top of task on top of task, to take on.
Yes, I learned that the hard way. I thought, let's go, let's write this up real quick, So that didn't happen.
Yeah, so I'm curious in the writing of the book, what came up for you? What kind of things did you get to explore about yourself in the writing of this book?
I just thought about, the things I've been through and the mistakes I've made or poor decisions I've made or whatever. And just thought about them and thought, I didn't have to do that way. I could have done it this way instead. And so, there's a chapter on sex that is very vulnerable for me. And it was really hard for me to write that chapter and be honest. So there were a lot of painful times when I was writing it. And then there were times when I was just laughing hysterically because some of the stories are still funny. At
Yeah.
least they are to me. I hope they're funny to other people.
No, they are funny to the reader, I assure you. That's
Well,
one
you.
of the things I appreciate is the lightheartedness. There's some heavy stuff you talk about, but yet in a way that's relatable. It's easy to read. Your stories are like, I feel like I can see myself within the story. I mean, it's that relatable, Nancy.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
You did bring up that chapter on sex, and what came to mind first was how really brave that was, and probably just so out of the norm for your generation to talk about sex out loud in this way. I mean, this is out in public and it's personal. That really was not something ever done. I mean, even for me, my mother taught me, we don't talk about those things in public.
Right. Yeah. I didn't want to write that chapter. In fact, I write that at the beginning of the chapter. I don't want to write this because I knew where God was taking me and saying, you have to be honest. It's not, everything's not peaches and cream for anybody through their whole life. And other people are going to make the same mistakes you made, and they're going to need that grace that it really took years before I forgave myself for the mistakes I've made. But when I did, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And I still, every now and again, what were you thinking? But, I just know that God has forgiven me, and there's been forgiveness between my husband and I. And, you got to move forward and keep going and thank God for his grace.
Yeah, like I said, that's definitely the theme throughout the entire book is grace. I just felt that very strongly through the book was just this overwhelming sense of you yourself have received grace, and that you're reminding all of us that that's available to everybody, is to receive that
Yeah.
grace and the forgiveness, and
Hmm.
from there to move forward, and not just stay stuck in where you were,
Right.
that you actually can move forward. I was brought up hearing repeatedly, try to learn from others' mistakes. It was something like ingrained in me.
Right.
Now, Nancy, I didn't listen to it. I mean, I was the one making the mistakes, and I'm hoping somebody else learned from me. I unfortunately did not take that advice very well until
Right.
I was in my late 20s. And I finally
Hmm.
went, oh, that's what my parents meant. Like, you don't have to suffer yourself. There's other people who already learned from that are sharing with you, and you could actually learn about it without going through it. It was like the big smack on the forehead moment of my life.
I always say I was a lot smarter when I was 20 than I am now, because I felt like I knew everything when I was 20, and like really people didn't have anything to teach me because I knew it all. I'd read the books and knew the stuff, and then life hit. So
Mm,
yes, it is something you figure out later on. When you're a little bit older, you figure out I probably didn't know everything that I thought
yeah.
I did.
Yeah, I
So
got to the point where I'm pretty sure I knew nothing. Like I literally knew nothing.
right.
And once I opened up the door to receive from other people that already walked ahead of me, my entire
Hmm.
life changed. And actually this book to me is like having a mentor, n- you know,
Hmm.
right in front of you every day. Each chapter, each page. I highly value mentors. It's something we teach our kids, that, having a mentor in your life, it's providing for you that space of, I've already been there. Here's what I learned. It
Right.
doesn't prevent
Right.
you from, of course, making your own mistakes, but it certainly does open up, the ability to see something from someone else's perspective, and especially when it's not your own parents. I mean, I know
Hmm.
my kids are amazing, and they're not going to necessarily listen to everything I say. I know that. So having
Right.
mentors is something we highly value and encourage in our kids. And I feel like this book could be the mentor someone's looking for, because that's what you
Yes.
bring out in this book is, hey, listen, I've made all these mistakes. I've made this decision, that decision, chose this, consequences here. And here's what I gleaned from it. And here's what you can take away from that. To the point, Nancy, where you even put at the end of those chapters, you have some great think about it questions at the end of every chapter, even.
Thank you. I put those questions there in case somebody wanted to, well, obviously for you to think about at the end of the chapter, but also if somebody wanted to lead a group of women through that book and like have discussions with as a small group or something like that. So that was my main thought in putting that there, is that young women could gather together with a couple of older women and um, discuss, what they read in the chapter and where they're at and how they responded to what I wrote. So
Oh my
that is
gosh.
why
My
that
a
happened.
light bulb
Yeah.
just went off in my head. I didn't even think about that, and that is brilliant. That is brilliant. I love it so much, because it's the kind of questions, and it could be partly my personality, where I would love to talk with someone else about that, because of course
Mm-hmm.
now, in my 40s, I'm all about, like, give me all the perspectives. I want to hear your story. I want to know this. I want to know what happened for you, unlike my younger years and early 20s, where I was like not receiving any of that, could have cared less,
Right.
just
Yeah.
did not matter to me. I love that idea of actually sitting with a group of women and discussing these chapters and those questions. That's brilliant, Nancy. I love it.
Well, thank you. I actually did lead a group several years ago. And that's when I started writing the book. I would write a chapter and then go lead it and send it off to the girls in the group. And then we'd go get together and meet and talk about it. And that was the very rough first draft of this book. So they were very good and patient with me, but yeah, so it was fun. It was a really good group, and we talked about some really honest and open things. So it was good.
Mm. I think that's so beautiful about women is I think there's something inside of us that desires that peace, to be
Hmm.
able to have a safe group of people to go to and discuss these things, to not
Right.
feel like I'm the only one who thought this thought, who did this thing, who made that choice, who lived with this consequence. Like I'm not alone.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. It helps you get through the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay. Can I
hmm,
share with you my favorite chapter in the book?
sure.
My
I
favorite
can't wait to
chapter
hear.
I know. My favorite chapter's actually chapter 3 because it's all about taking risk.
Oh, sure.
And now
Yes.
let me preface it for myself that I've always taken risk. I mean, I'm pretty sure my parents, would say yes, and gosh, I wish she hadn't. We were just having a family conversation about the time I took a risk jumping off a boulder, cracking my head open when I was in pre-K. All the stitches,
Oh.
all the everything. My poor
Hmm.
parents. I was a risk taker though. I mean, out of the womb. I'm sure there might have been other things before that. That was one of the big ones that literally left a scar on my body. But
Yes.
I've always been a risk taker. I've always been somebody who would be willing to say the things other people weren't going to
Hmm.
say, do the things.
Hmm.
But I want to say all of it was coming from an act of rebellion when I was young.
Uh-huh.
I struggled a lot with failing as I got older. I didn't want to fail. You and I know the
Right.
Enneagram. We've shared, I've had Hillary McCaskey, who
Right.
is a mutual coach for both of us. And I'm a type 3. And as soon as she highlighted that piece for me that failure is a no-no. We don't want to fail, type 3s. We like avoid it like the plague. As I, matured and got older, those risks looked so different because if I risked failing, I would back out because I didn't want to fail.
Yes. And
And
there's so many things that you don't want to be, you're not willing to risk. And then you think, well, what difference does it make? I mean, like, so if I bring up the example of not taking a risk in a game that I was playing with my son, I'm like, no, I can't take a risk because I might lose. I'm like, well, I lost anyway. So it's like sometimes the risks you're not willing to take are like so minuscule that they don't matter.
mm,
And I mean, not that they don't matter, but they're not going to change the course of your life necessarily.
yeah.
But other risks will
Hmm.
definitely change the course of your life. So, and in a good way, I think.
Yes, I agree. I think that's why that chapter stands out for me of all the chapters. I valued that so much. And again, when I read it from that perspective of I wish I had, had that chapter years ago. Like
Mm-hmm.
years and years ago now. Where I wish I had that wisdom to come in that it was okay to take those risks. And I mean, and you address failure. Like it's okay to fail. It's okay to fall, like just fall on your face, fail. And the benefits of
Totally.
failure can be so enriching.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's how you learn.
Yeah.
That's how you go to the next step.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well,
No
I
one
get that
likes to
now.
fail. I know. It's easy to look back and go, oh yeah,
Mm.
that's good. But yeah, no one likes to fail, but it's okay. Failures, and John Maxwell has a book out called Failing Forward. And
Yes.
in there he talks about a whole bunch of um, entrepreneurs that you and I would both recognize and know. The one I can remember is Colonel Sanders, and the number of people and how many times they failed before they succeeded. And the only failure is not to keep trying.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's so good, Nancy. That's so true. I get it
Should have
now.
put that in the book.
Yeah. Oh, I get it now. I wish I had gotten it then. Oh, I wish I had gotten it
Right.
then. And I think about that sometimes too, Nancy, when we're talking about our younger self, because I think about her often. I really do. And I don't know if she was ready to receive the things, when I think I needed them. I don't kn I think I
Uh-huh.
feel like there would have been some pushback. I'm talking that between, 17 so I was 17 years old when I graduated high school. I was married at
Mhm.
21, and
Mhm.
in that time when I probably needed it the most, I just don't know if I would have received it, like, by the age of 20 between 27 and 30, like, that's when I
Right.
was seeking it out, and this book so if you're listening and you are, 27 and up, this book, you are right there. You are right there, because
Right.
that's when I would have received it better, and I think it would have helped me navigate those years, which actually were really hard. That 27 to 30 was a really tough time for me, that this is the kind of book I would have just eaten up and, could have really shifted how hard I was on myself during those years.
Right. I would say that I'm still learning some of the lessons I wrote in that book. When I reread it like 1,000 times before it was published, I kept going, "Oh, that's good," and
Mm.
not to brag. I'm not saying that. I'm not because I'm just. It's like, oh, I forgot about that. I need to remember that.
Mm.
I would say go ahead and read it when you're 20, and then read it again when you're 30 or 27 or whatever. Um, because it's going to always be applicable,
Yeah.
and you're going to need to relearn and rebelieve some of the lessons. Like when you screw up, there's a whole chapter on accepting God's forgiveness. And when you screw up, you might need to read through that chapter again because you can sit around and beat yourself up.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's not where God wants you to be.
You know what's really great about this, and you're kinda hitting on that, you really could open up this book, and if something speaks to you right away, jump right to it. I really
Mm-hmm.
like that, how you created this where I could start from beginning, go to end, or
Right.
like a lot of my listeners who are gonna grab this book, they might wanna jump right to that sex chapter because now, of course, they're like, "What did she say?"
I should have made that chapter one just to get it out of the way.
No, no,
But
you keep that right where it is, it's perfect. I'm curious, Nancy, do you have a favorite chapter or something that really stands out from the totality of the book for you?
I would say there's two, and one is on accepting God's forgiveness. That's not the title of it. I can't remember the title of it right now. But um, the second one is we get to choose whether we want to forgive other people or not. And I think those are
Mm,
huge lessons that will change how we fare in life. And so I guess I would say those are my two favorites because I need to hear that again and again.
yeah, that's so good. That one on forgiving others. Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
that one hits to the core, Nancy. We could do a whole
Yeah.
episode here just talking about that journey. Again, a book I needed many, many years ago.
I know.
Really.
Because forgiveness is really hard. I
Mhm.
mean, even this morning, I was thinking about something that had happened to me from another friend, and it still stings. And this morning, even I said, Lord, I need to forgive her. Help me to forgive her again.
Mm,
So, it comes up over and over again.
yeah. And again, I just want to reiterate the beauty of the way you wrote this book is I don't want to minimize it by calling it a reference, but you could open up just to that chapter and
You
use
could.
that as a guide, use it as a reference, use that as a reminder when you're in that particular situation.
Hmm.
Like, so good. It's so good. And again, it's because what you share is relatable. I mean, it's yes, an easy read. There's definitely some beautiful humor in your personality. I feel it when I'm reading it, which is makes the best
Uh-huh.
kind of books. But I also see myself in your stories, and that's why I know I could come back again and again and say, I need this. I need to go read this. And, we've already talked about the chapter on sex. If we haven't brought it up enough, one more time, that, in raising daughters, like that to me
Hmm.
is one to keep coming back to. There's
Hmm.
just such good wisdom and honesty. And as a woman who's I myself, happily married, life is still out there. There's temptation,
Yeah.
there's things that we're exposed to, sometimes that we're aware of and some that we're not. And it's just
Hmm.
the beauty of your authenticity and vulnerability is what draws me in to keep coming back.
That's good. I think there's no set, each chapter is independent in and of itself.
Yeah.
There's a reason I put them in the order I did, but it just flowed that way. But you could read, you could start with chapter 2 and go to chapter 11 and then go back to chapter 1. And I mean, you could read it in any order because they're all independent of each other.
Yeah. I really think what's going to be great is that when people find you on social media and they've
Hmm.
told you because they heard this, they're like, listen, Nancy, the book is amazing, but I did read the sex chapter first because you guys kept talking about it. You just need to let me know when that happens because I'm pretty sure that's going to intrigue people the most right now because, well, hot dang, we just keep talking about it. Oh, that's so
Yes,
great.
like, thank you. That was the hardest chapter I had to write, and now you keep bringing it up.
Yes,
So,
I do. Yes, I do. And here's the thing in my heart is you hit the nail on the head with it. Talking about it isn't comfortable, but we need to talk about those things that you bring up
right.
in that chapter. I think bringing them to light is the only way we move forward. So you're right. I'm going to keep talking about it
Hmm.
because it needs to be talked
Hmm.
about. But for now, I'll move on. Um,
Okay.
so, Nancy, the book has released. It released on January 12th. And where
Hmm.
can women get this book?
It's available on Amazon, and just go to Amazon and Google or type in, back away from the cookies, and it should pop up.
That's great. You know what I'm going to do too is, listeners, I'm going to put a direct link to Amazon right in the show notes below so that it's going to be super easy peasy for you to go grab Nancy's book. Nancy, we can also find you on social media.
Yes, I am on Facebook. I have an author page on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram. And I have a Twitter account, but I don't use it. So don't go there looking for me. But
Oh, that's so great. You always have fun stuff you're posting on your Instagram and, I know that's always a learning curve, but I love that you have first of all beautiful pictures, even if there's white fluffy stuff right now that I'm seeing in the pictures, all that snow.
right.
But you always have some great wisdom that you're sharing. I love that part. I'm going to link all of Nancy's social media and the book below because this book, Back Away from the Cookies, is one you're going to want to dive right into. It's an easy read. You're going to feel like you know Nancy and that maybe Nancy is you. I really feel that way the whole time reading this book. And I believe that any woman who picks this up is going to be so blessed by your ability to share those parts of you that sometimes we keep hidden.
Thank you. Yeah, my friend wrote an endorsement on the back of the book that said it was like sitting down and having coffee with me. So
Mm,
that's what she got when she read it. She felt like she was just like a friend of mine. Well, she is a friend of mine, but that we were just sitting down having coffee together and chatting about our book. So
yeah.
if I hope all the readers will feel that way when they read it. And if they don't, call me up and I'll have coffee with them. We could find a restaurant open.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to sit down with you. I want a cup of coffee, but I'm bringing the dang cookies, Nancy. I'm bringing all the
Yes.
cookies for us to enjoy with this book. Ladies, you are going to want this. Nancy, you are such an amazing human. I know it has taken years of work and everything in you to release this amazing book. And I just applaud you. I'm so grateful for you. And I know that this book is going to be a blessing to so many women.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I appreciate that.
Thanks so much for coming on today to share with us. And ladies, don't forget, head to the show notes, grab Nancy's book, give it a read, give it a review, find her on social media, connect with her, and thank her for putting herself out there so we can learn from her mistakes, her choices, and maybe, just maybe, we don't have to make them too. Thanks again, Nancy.
Right. You're welcome. Have a great day, Jennifer.
Thank you.